The hospital waiting room smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. Hae-Song sat 3 chairs away from a boy with the bluest eyes she'd ever seen, watching him read a medical journal that looked way too big for someone his age. She'd been working up the courage to talk to him for the past 10 minutes while her father argued with the registration desk about insurance coverage. Again, another appointment, more tests that would find nothing. And more doctors saying they didn't understand what was wrong. But Hae-Song knew what was wrong. She just didn't know how to make anyone believe her. The boy turned a page without looking up. He had dark brown skin that seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights, and when he adjusted his position, crossing one leg over the other, Hae-Song caught another glimpse of those impossible blue eyes, like the sky in pictures of places without pollution, like something beautiful that didn't belong in this ordinary world of hospitals and sickness and fear. He was maybe 8, like her, dressed neatly in a gray hoodie and clean jeans, expensive sneakers that were somehow still perfectly white. He read with complete focus, occasionally reaching up to scratch his nose or adjust the book in his lap, never once looking away from the page. The words on the open pages were too small for Hae-Song to read from where she sat, but she could make out phrases like heavy metal toxicity and bioavailability, and wondered what kind of 8-year-old read things like that. Her father's voice rose slightly at the registration desk, frustrated but trying to stay polite. Hae-Song knew that tone. It meant he was in pain, but didn't want anyone to know. It meant his hands were shaking again, and he was trying to hide it. It meant time was running out, and she had to do something, had to tell someone, or had to make someone listen, even if they thought she was making things up. She stood slowly, smoothing down her pale pink dress with trembling hands. 3 steps brought her to the chair next to the boy. He still didn't look up, just kept reading, his finger tracing lines of text she couldn't understand. "Excuse me," Hae-Song said softly in careful English, her accent making the words feel heavy in her mouth. The boy's lips quirked into a small smile, but he didn't raise his eyes from the page. "If you're looking for the bathroom, it's down the hall past the vending machines. If you want the cafeteria, it's closed until 6. And if you need a doctor, you're in the right place, but you gotta take a number at the desk." His voice was kind, not dismissive, just distracted. American accent, warm and friendly. Hae-Song's hands twisted together in front of her. This was harder than she thought it would be, but she'd watched her father get weaker every single day for 6 months. She'd seen things nobody believed. She'd tried telling her aunt, her teachers, even a school counselor, and everyone said the same thing. "Hae-Song, you're grieving your mother. Sometimes our minds make up stories when we're sad. Your father is just sick. The doctors are helping him." But the doctors weren't helping. They couldn't help because they didn't know what they were looking for. And Hae-Song couldn't wait anymore. "Is your mother a good person?" she asked, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. That made him look up. Those blue eyes focused on her completely, and Hae-Song felt like she was being seen for the first time in months. Really seen, not looked at like she was a confused child or a problem to be managed, but seen like she was a real person, with real thoughts that mattered. The boy closed his journal carefully, marking his place with his finger, and tilted his head slightly to study her face. "Yeah," he said slowly, his voice gentler now. "She's like the best person I know. She's a doctor here, or works way too hard. Cries when patients die even though she's not supposed to. Gives me lunch money and then skips lunch herself so other people can eat." He paused, those blue eyes never leaving her face. "Why?" Hae-Song's throat felt tight. She could feel tears building behind her eyes, hot and insistent, but she'd learned not to cry where people could see. Crying made adults uncomfortable. It made them pat your head and say soothing things that didn't mean anything. But this boy wasn't patting her head or looking away. He was just waiting, patient and steady, like he had all the time in the world to hear whatever she needed to say. "Can I sit with you?" Hae-Song whispered. The boy immediately moved his backpack from the chair beside him and patted the seat. "Always got room for someone who asks first. I'm Richard Hayes." Hae-Song. She sat carefully, arranging her skirt, her hands still trembling in her lap. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Richard waited. He didn't push or demand or get impatient. He just sat there with his medical journal in his lap and those impossibly blue eyes, watching her with an expression that said he knew she had something important to tell him, and he was willing to wait as long as it took for her to find the words. Finally, Hae-Song took a shaky breath. "Someone is killing my daddy." Richard didn't laugh, didn't roll his eyes, didn't tell her she was being dramatic. Instead, he carefully set his journal down on the empty chair on his other side and turned to face her more fully, giving her his complete attention. "Slowly or fast?" The question was so unexpected that Hae-Song answered without thinking. "Slowly, then we have time," Richard said, his voice calm and steady like he was talking about homework instead of murder. When did it start? 6 months ago, when she moved in. She? Daddy's fiancée, Miss Seo-yeon. Hae-Song's voice dropped even lower, and barely above a whisper. She's very pretty. Everyone likes her. But I see things nobody else sees. Richard leaned forward slightly. What kind of things? She makes Daddy's coffee special, just for him. She wears gloves when she cooks his food, but nobody else's. And he always gets sicker after. Always. The words were coming faster now, tumbling over each other. His hair is falling out. His hands shake. He throws up all the time. The doctors do tests and tests and tests, but they never find anything wrong. But I know she's doing something to him. Have you told anyone? Hae-Song nodded miserably. My aunt said I'm making up stories because I miss my mommy. Mommy died 2 years ago in a car accident. The school counselor said I'm having trouble accepting Daddy's new relationship. My teacher said maybe I should talk to someone about my imagination. She looked up at Richard, tears finally spilling over. Miss, but I'm not making it up. I saw her put something in his coffee, from a little bottle. She didn't know I was watching. Richard was quiet for a moment, his blue eyes thoughtful. Then he said something Hae-Song didn't expect. I believe you. You do? Yeah. You know why? Richard shifted in his chair to face her more directly. Because grown-ups are really bad at listening to kids. They think we don't notice stuff or we make things up. But actually, kids notice everything. We see patterns. We pay attention. And you don't look like someone making up stories. You look scared. Really scared. Hae-Song felt something loosen in her chest. Someone believed her. Finally, after 6 months of being dismissed and patted on the head, and told she was confused, someone actually believed her. What does the stuff in the bottle look like? Richard asked. White powder, like sugar. But Daddy's coffee already has sugar in it. Does she put it in anything else? His food sometimes. When she thinks nobody's watching. But she's very careful, very sneaky. Richard pulled out a phone from his hoodie pocket and opened the Notes app. Okay, tell me everything. When did your dad's symptoms start? Like, exactly when? April 15th. That's when Miss Seo-yeon moved into our house. Daddy said she was going to help take care of things because he was so busy with his work. He's a scientist. And he works on medicine things. What kind of medicine things? Making cancer treatment cheaper. He says the big companies charge too much money and people die because they can't afford help. He wants to fix that. Richard's fingers paused over his phone screen. Wait, your dad is trying to make cancer treatment affordable? Yes. He's very smart. Everyone says so. And 6 months ago, this woman moved in. And now he's mysteriously sick, and doctors can't figure out why. Richard's voice had changed slightly. Still calm, but with an edge of something sharp underneath. That's really suspicious, Hae-Song. You think so? Yeah, I think so. What are his symptoms? Like, specifically? Hae-Song counted them off on her fingers. His hair falls out in the shower. I see it in the drain. His hands shake when he tries to hold chopsticks. He throws up after breakfast almost every day. He can't walk very well anymore. Sometimes his legs just stop working right, and he's so tired all the time. He used to play with me after work, but now he just sleeps. Richard typed rapidly on his phone. Does he have any skin problems? Like rashes or anything? His feet hurt. He says it feels like needles. More typing. What about his stomach? I know you said he throws up, but does he have pain? Yes, all the time. Richard was quiet for a long moment, staring at his phone screen. And then he looked up at Hae-Song with an expression she couldn't quite read. I think I might know what's wrong with your dad, but I need to check something first. Can you do me a favor? What favor? Does your dad have a hairbrush? Yes. Can you bring it to me tomorrow? I'll be here. My mom works second shift on Thursdays, so I have to wait for her until like 9 o'clock. Why do you need his hairbrush? Richard hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Because I think someone is poisoning your dad with something called thallium. It's a heavy metal, really toxic, and it causes exactly the symptoms you just described. Hair loss, shaking, vomiting, neuropathy. That's the needle feeling in his feet. Everything. But here's the thing. It doesn't show up on regular blood tests. Doctors have to specifically test for it. And if nobody thinks to look for it, then they'll never find it. Hae-Song's eyes went wide. How do you know this? Richard held up his medical journal. I read a lot, and I remembered seeing something about this in here a few weeks ago. I didn't think I'd ever actually need to know about it, but he shrugged. Anyway, if we can get your dad's hair tested for heavy metals, we can prove he's being poisoned. Then people will have to believe you. But how do we test it? I know a lab tech here. She's nice. She thinks I'm cute because of the blue eyes. Richard rolled those eyes dramatically. I can probably convince her to run a test if I tell her it's for my mom. She won't ask too many questions. You would do that? For me? But you don't even know me. Richard's expression softened. Look, Hae-Song, I don't remember my dad very well. He died when I was 4. Brain aneurysm. 1 minute he was making pancakes, the next minute he was gone. And the doctors said there was nothing anyone could have done. His voice got quieter. But your dad? Your dad we can help. If someone's poisoning him and we prove it, we can stop them. We can save him. And I'm not going to just sit here and do nothing when I could help. That's not who I am. Hae-Song felt more tears coming, but these were different. Not sad tears, hopeful tears. Thank you, Richard. Don't thank me yet. We haven't done anything. Just bring me that hairbrush tomorrow, okay? Yeah, and Hae-Song, He reached out and squeezed her hand gently. "You're really brave. You asked for help when you needed it. That's the smartest thing you could have done." Before Hae-Song could respond, her father appeared beside them, looking exhausted. Dr. Kang Min-jae was still handsome despite being sick, tall and elegant with long dark hair that fell over his right eye. But Hae-Song could see how much weight he'd lost, how his shoulders hunched slightly like standing up straight took too much effort, how his hand trembled as he reached out to touch her shoulder. "Hae-Song, we need to go," he said in Korean, his voice gentle but strained. "The doctor wants to schedule more tests for next week." "Yes, Daddy." Hae-Song stood quickly, then turned back to Richard. "Tomorrow?" she asked in English. "Tomorrow," Richard confirmed. "Same time, same place. I'll be here." As Hae-Song followed her father toward the elevator, she looked back once. Richard had already returned to his medical journal, but he glanced up and gave her a small wave and a reassuring smile. Those blue eyes seemed to say, "Don't worry, we've got this." And for the first time in 6 months, Hae-Song felt like maybe everything might be okay. The next day, Hae-Song arrived at the hospital at 8:30, clutching her father's hairbrush in a plastic bag. Richard was already there, sitting in the same chair, reading a different book this time. When he saw her, he tucked the book into his backpack and stood up. "You got it?" Hae-Song handed him the bag. "Will this work?" "Should. If there's thallium in his system, it'll show up in his hair. That's how heavy metal poisoning works. It gets into everything. Hair, nails, bones." Richard examined the hairbrush through the plastic. "Perfect. Okay, wait here. I'll be back in like 20 minutes. Where are you going?" "To charm a lab tech." Richard grinned. "Wish me luck." He disappeared down a corridor marked staff only, moving with confident purpose like he belonged there. Hae-Song sat down to wait, her heart pounding. What if this didn't work? What if the test came back negative and Richard stopped believing her too? What if she really was just a confused little girl making up stories? 25 minutes later, Richard returned with a slip of paper in his hand and an expression on his face that made Hae-Song's stomach drop. What is it?" Richard sat down beside her and showed her the paper. It was covered in numbers and words Hae-Song didn't understand. But at the bottom, 2 words were circled in red pen: elevated thallium. "You were right," Richard said quietly. "Someone is definitely poisoning your dad." Hae-Song's hands flew to her mouth. "I was right. Then I was right, and nobody believed me, and he could have died, and—" Hey, Richard grabbed her shoulders gently. "Breathe, okay? Just breathe. We found it. That's the important part. Now we can stop it." "How?" "We tell my mom." "But what if she doesn't believe us either?" Richard's blue eyes were steady and certain. "She will, because I'm going to make sure she does." That night, Richard sat at his kitchen table doing homework, while his mother, Dr. Naomi Hayes, unpacked groceries. She was beautiful in the way that made people do double takes. Tall and graceful, with long, curly hair pulled back in a professional bun, her dark skin glowing even when she was exhausted. She'd changed out of her hospital scrubs into comfortable clothes, but Richard could see how tired she was from the way her shoulders sagged slightly as she put milk in the refrigerator. "Mom?" She didn't turn around, still organizing vegetables. If someone was being poisoned with thallium, well, what would their symptoms be? His mother went very still. Then she slowly turned to face him. "That's a very specific question, baby. Why are you asking about thallium poisoning?" "Just curious. I was reading about it." "Richard," his mother crossed her arms and gave him the look, the one that said, "I know you're not telling me the whole truth, and I'm waiting. What's going on?" Richard pulled out the lab results and slid them across the table. "I need you to look at something." His mother picked up the paper, her eyes scanning quickly. Her expression changed from tired to alert in an instant. "Where did you get this?" "A friend needed help." "What friend?" "Richard, this is a heavy metal screening panel. Who authorized this test? Why is there no patient name on it?" "Because the patient's doctors don't know to look for thallium. They've been testing for everything else, but not that. And the patient is getting sicker, and nobody can figure out why." Richard took a deep breath. "Mom, I met this girl at the hospital yesterday. Her name is Hae-Song. She's 8, like me, and she thinks someone is poisoning her dad. She told me all his symptoms, and I looked them up, and it matched thallium poisoning exactly. So I got a hair sample and asked Jenny in the lab to test it. And look," he tapped the results. "She was right. Someone really is poisoning him." His mother sat down heavily in the chair across from him. "Richard, you can't just go around running unauthorized medical tests on people." "Mom, he's dying." Richard's voice cracked slightly. "His daughter came to me for help because nobody else would listen to her. All the adults told her she was making things up or being dramatic or whatever. But she wasn't. She was telling the truth. And if we don't do something, her dad is going to die." Naomi was quiet for a long moment, staring at the lab results. Finally, she looked up at her son with an expression Richard couldn't quite read. "Tell me everything, from the beginning." So Richard did. He told her about meeting Hae-Song in the waiting room, about her fears, about the symptoms she'd described, about the woman who'd moved in 6 months ago and made special coffee just for Hae-Song's father. He told her about Dr. Kang Min-jae's work trying to make cancer treatment affordable. He told her how Hae-Song had seen the woman putting white powder in her father's food. When he finished, his mother was quiet again, her fingers drumming on the table in that way she did when she was thinking through a medical puzzle. "You said the father is Dr. Kang Min-jae?" "Yeah. Do you know him?" "I know of him. He's published some groundbreaking research on cellular regeneration. Very controversial because it would significantly reduce pharmaceutical profit margins." She picked up the lab results again. "If someone wanted to stop his research, they'd stop him," Richard finished. "Mom, we have to help." "We do. But we need to be smart about this. If someone really is deliberately poisoning him, they're dangerous, and we need to make sure we protect both Dr. Kang and his daughter." Naomi reached across the table and took Richard's hand. "I'm proud of you, baby. For listening to that little girl when nobody else would. For taking her seriously. For being brave enough to help. So, what do we do? First, I request a meeting with Dr. Kang. Professional courtesy, doctor to doctor. I'll say I've heard about his research and want to discuss it. That'll give me a legitimate reason to examine him and order proper tests. Second, we document everything. Every symptom, every timeline detail, everything Hae-Song has observed. Third, we be very careful. As if someone is willing to commit murder, they won't hesitate to hurt people who get in their way." Richard felt a chill run down his spine. "Do you think we're in danger?" His mother's expression was serious. "I think we need to be cautious, but I also think we're doing the right thing. Sometimes doing the right thing is scary, but we do it anyway." She squeezed his hand. "Tomorrow, I'll reach out to Dr. Kang's office and request a consultation. In the meantime, you be careful around that girl's family, okay? No more investigating on your own. If there's something dangerous happening, you come to me first. Promise?" "Promise." "Good." She pulled him into a hug, and Richard breathed in the familiar scent of her lavender lotion. "I love you, sweetheart. Your father would be so proud of the person you're becoming." Before we continue, I've got to ask you something because I'm genuinely curious. Where are you watching this from right now? Like, are you team phone in bed at 2 a.m., team laptop at your desk pretending to work, or team smart TV in the living room? Drop a comment and let me know what device you're on and where in the world you're watching from, because I'm pretty sure nobody actually uses tablets anymore, but I could be wrong. And hey, if you're already invested in Hae-Song and Richard and their mission to save her dad, trust me, you haven't seen anything yet. Hit that subscribe button because what these two kids are about to pull off will make you appreciate the brilliance in children who refuse to stay quiet when something's wrong. 2 days later, Dr. Naomi Hayes stood in the living room of Dr. Kang Min-jae's luxury apartment, watching her son and the little Korean girl sit together on the floor with coloring books spread between them. It was a strange cover for what they were really doing, Naomi thought. Richard was subtly questioning Hae-Song about her father's daily routine while appearing to help her color a picture of flowers, and the little girl was answering in whispers while carefully staying inside the lines. "Dr. Hayes?" Min-jae's voice pulled Naomi's attention back to the man sitting across from her. He looked worse in person than his photograph suggested. The long dark hair that was supposed to fall artistically over his right eye was noticeably thinning. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted a teacup. His skin had a grayish tinge that spoke of systemic poisoning. "I'm sorry, I got distracted," Naomi said smoothly. "You were saying?" "I was thanking you for taking an interest in my research. Most mainstream physicians dismiss my work as too radical." His smile was tired but genuine. "It's refreshing to meet someone willing to have an open conversation about making healthcare accessible." "Your work is important," Naomi said honestly. "But Dr. Kang, I have to be direct with you. I didn't just come here to discuss research." She pulled out a folder from her bag and set it on the coffee table between them. "I came because I'm concerned about your health." Min-jae's expression shifted from friendly to guarded. "I don't understand." "Your symptoms: hair loss, peripheral neuropathy, gastric distress, muscle weakness. How long have you been experiencing these?" "About 6 months. But I've seen multiple specialists. They've run every test imaginable and found nothing conclusive." "Did anyone test you for heavy metal exposure?" "Heavy metal? No. Why would they?" Naomi opened the folder and pulled out the lab results. "Because I believe you're being poisoned with thallium." The color drained from Min-jae's face. "That's not... How could you possibly? Your daughter came to my son for help." Min-jae's eyes went wide. He looked across the room at Hae-Song, who had stopped coloring and was watching him with anxious eyes. "Hae-Song did what?" "Daddy, I'm sorry," Hae-Song said in Korean, tears starting to spill over. "But you're sick and nobody would listen, and Richard said he could help," and Min-jae stood up too quickly and immediately swayed. Naomi was on her feet instantly, steadying him as he caught his balance again. against the arm of the sofa. Easy. Your neuropathy is going to make balance difficult. How did you get these test results? Min Jae's voice was shaking now. Whether from anger or fear, Naomi couldn't tell. That's not important right now. What's important is that you're being systematically poisoned, and we need to stop it immediately. Naomi helped him sit back down. Dr. Kang, who has access to your food and drink? Who prepares your meals? My fiancé, Seo-yeon, does most of the cooking, but she wouldn't. She loves me. We're getting married in 3 months. Daddy, Hae-Song's voice was very small. I saw her put something in your coffee. Min Jae turned to his daughter, his expression crumbling. What? From a little bottle, white powder. I saw her lots of times. I tried to tell Aunt Mi-sun, but she said I was making up stories because I miss Mommy. Richard stood up and walked over to Min Jae, those blue eyes serious and steady. Sir, I know this is really hard to hear, but Hae-Song came to me because nobody else would believe her. And when she told me your symptoms, I looked them up and they matched thallium poisoning exactly. So we tested your hair and he pointed at the lab results. She was telling the truth. Min Jae stared at the papers in Naomi's hand like they were a bomb about to explode. Thallium poisoning. Someone has been poisoning me for 6 months. Yes, Naomi said gently. And if we don't start treatment immediately, the damage could become permanent. I need to get you to the hospital right now for proper chelation therapy. We'll use Prussian blue to bind the thallium and flush it from your system. But Seo-yeon, she couldn't. Why would she? I don't know, Naomi admitted. But we need to figure that out. In the meantime, you can't eat or drink anything she prepares. Nothing. Do you understand? Min Jae nodded numbly. Then he looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and seemed to see her for the first time in months. You tried to tell people. You tried to save me. I was scared nobody would believe me, Hae-Song whispered. But Richard believed me, and his mom believed him. And now you're going to be okay, right, Daddy? Min Jae opened his arms, and his daughter ran into them, both of them crying now. I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry I didn't listen. Richard shifted awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional scene. Naomi caught his eye and mouthed, "We did good," and Richard gave her a small, proud smile. They did do good, but they weren't done yet. At the hospital 3 hours later, Min Jae was settled into a private room with an IV of Prussian blue running into his arm and strict orders that only Naomi or hospital staff were allowed to bring him food or drink. Richard and Hae-Song sat in plastic chairs outside the room, both exhausted but refusing to leave. Your mom is really nice, Hae-Song said quietly. Yeah, she's pretty awesome. Richard pulled out his phone and started scrolling through something. Hey, can I ask you something? What? Your dad's fiancé, Seo-yeon. What do you know about her? Hae-Song thought for a moment. She's very pretty. She worked at a gallery where Daddy saw some of his research displayed. They met there and started dating. That was about a year ago. And she moved in 6 months ago? Yes. Daddy said it was because he needed help managing the house, and I needed someone to take care of me since he worked so much. Richard's fingers flew across his phone screen. What's her full name? Park Seo-yeon. More typing. Then Richard went very still. Hae-Song, does your dad's research compete with any big pharmaceutical companies? He says lots of companies don't like his work because it would make their cancer medicines cost less money. Why? Because I just found Park Seo-yeon's LinkedIn profile. And guess where she worked before she met your dad? Richard showed Hae-Song the phone screen. Hae-Song Pharmaceutical Company. She was in their special projects division for 3 years. Hae-Song's eyes went wide. That's one of the companies Daddy says hates his research the most. Exactly. Richard's voice had gone hard. She was a plant. They sent her to get close to your dad so she could stop his research. And the way to stop research is to stop the researcher. But how do we prove it? We watch her. We document everything. And then we make her think she's winning so she gets sloppy. Richard looked at Hae-Song seriously. Are you brave enough to go back home and act like nothing's changed? You want me to spy on her? No. I want you to be very careful and very safe. But if she asks about your dad, you tell her the doctors still don't know what's wrong. You don't let her know we figured it out. Can you do that? Hae-Song's hands trembled, but she nodded. I can be brave. Oh, for Daddy. That's my girl? Richard squeezed her hand. We're going to stop her, Songbird. I promise. Songbird? Yeah. You sang truth when everyone else was quiet. That's what songbirds do. They sing. Over the next 2 weeks, several things happened. Min Jae slowly improved with the chelation therapy, his hair starting to grow back, his hands steadying, color returning to his face. Naomi requested permission to conduct a formal medical study on his case, which gave her legitimate access to continue monitoring him closely. Richard and Hae-Song became inseparable, with Richard visiting the Kang apartment 3 times a week under the guise of being Hae-Song's friend while his mother worked late. And Richard watched everything. He noticed that Seo-yeon wore latex gloves whenever she prepared Min Jae's special coffee. He noticed she kept a small locked box in her bathroom cabinet. Or he noticed she made phone calls in English when she thought nobody could hear, and he wrote down every word he could catch. The situation is becoming complicated, he heard her say one afternoon while Hae-Song distracted her father in his study. He's not deteriorating as quickly as planned. Yes, I'm being careful. No, nobody suspects anything. The child is harmless. Everyone thinks she's just a grieving daughter imagining things. Richard recorded it all on his phone. 2 weeks after Min-jae's hospitalization, Naomi invited both Dr. Kang and his daughter to dinner at her apartment. It was small but warm, filled with pictures of Richard as a baby and a handsome black man Richard barely remembered who must have been his father. They ate Korean takeout because Naomi apologized that she was a terrible cook, and the kids sat on the floor with their own plates while the adults talked at the table. "How long has it been since your husband passed?" Min-jae asked gently, gesturing to a photograph on the wall. 4 years. Aneurysm. Very sudden. Naomi's voice was steady, but Richard could hear the old pain underneath. Richard was only 4. He doesn't remember much. "I'm sorry. That must have been incredibly difficult." "It was, but we managed. Richard's an amazing kid. He keeps me going." She smiled at her son, who smiled back around a mouthful of noodles. "What about Hae-Song's mother? Car accident. 2 years ago. Drunk driver ran a red light." Min-jae's hand tightened on his chopsticks. Hae-Song was supposed to be in the car too, but she had stayed home sick that day. "Sometimes I think about that, how close I came to losing both of them." "Daddy, don't think about sad things," Hae-Song said from the floor. "Richard says we should think about happy things." "Oh, he does he?" Naomi raised an eyebrow at her son. "Well, yeah," Richard said matter-of-factly. "Because if you think about sad stuff all the time, you just get sadder. But if you think about happy stuff, like how we're all together right now eating really good food and nobody's dying, that's better." Min-jae laughed, the first real laugh Richard had heard from him. "Your son is very wise. He has his moments." Naomi's expression turned serious. "Min-jae, we need to talk about what happens next." "I know." He set down his chopsticks. I've been thinking about it constantly. I should go to the police." "You should, but there's a problem. Right now, all we have is a lab test showing thallium in your system and a child's testimony about seeing Seo-yeon put something in your coffee. That's not enough for a criminal case. So what do we do?" Richard looked up from his plate, his blue eyes gleaming with something Naomi recognized as her son's version of "I have a plan." "We make her confess." "Richard," Naomi started. "No, now hear me out. She thinks she's won, right? She thinks nobody knows what she's doing. So we use that. We make her feel safe. And then we get her to admit it." "And how exactly do we do that?" Min-jae asked. Richard glanced at Hae-Song, who nodded. "Hae-Song confronts her, tells her she knows what she's doing. Seo-yeon will think it's just a kid making accusations. She'll think nobody will believe Hae-Song anyway, so she'll get arrogant and admit it." "Absolutely not," Min-jae and Naomi said at the same time. "It's too dangerous," Min-jae continued. "I won't put my daughter at risk." "She won't be at risk," Richard insisted, "because I'll be recording everything on my phone, and Mom will be right there in the next room. And Dr. Kang, you'll be there too. We just need Seo-yeon to say the words. That's it. Then we have proof." "He's right," Hae-Song said softly, "and I want to do it. She tried to kill my daddy. She should go to jail." Min-jae looked at his daughter with an expression of such mixed pride and fear that Naomi felt her heart ache. She thought of Richard at 4 years old, how she would have done anything to protect him, how she still would. But she also knew that sometimes protecting children meant trusting them to be brave. "If we do this," Min-jae said slowly, if, there would be conditions, multiple adults present, exit strategy, and if at any point it feels unsafe, we stop immediately." "Agreed," Naomi said. "When?" Hae-Song asked. Richard pulled out his phone and looked at the calendar. "This Saturday, Seo-yeon is planning a dinner party, right? To celebrate your dad's recovery." "How do you know that?" Min-jae asked. "I pay attention." Richard shrugged. "Anyway, there'll be guests, witnesses, safety in numbers, and after dinner, Hae-Song can ask to talk to Seo-yeon privately. I'll hide in the hallway with my phone. You guys will be nearby, and we get her to admit what she's been doing." It was a simple plan, almost too simple. But sometimes, Naomi thought, the simple plans were the ones that worked. Saturday evening arrived with an unseasonable chill that made Naomi grateful for the excuse to wear a long-sleeve dress. She and Richard arrived at the Kang apartment at 7, along with 3 of Min-jae's colleagues from the Research Institute and 2 neighbors from the building. The apartment smelled like expensive catered food, and Seo-yeon floated through the rooms in a designer dress, playing the perfect hostess. She was stunning, Naomi had to admit. Delicate features, flawless skin, a smile that seemed genuinely warm. If Naomi hadn't known better, she would have thought Seo-yeon was exactly what she appeared to be, a woman in love preparing to marry a brilliant scientist. But Naomi did know better. Dinner was tense despite Seo-yeon's best efforts to keep conversation light. Min-jae barely touched his food, which Seo-yeon had insisted on preparing herself despite the caterers. Richard sat next to Hae-Song, both children unusually quiet, barely eating. The research colleagues discussed cellular regeneration and pharmaceutical politics. The neighbors complained about building maintenance. Naomi made polite small talk and watched everything. After dessert, and as guests began gathering in the living room for coffee, Hae-Song stood up and walked over to Seo-yeon with that particular determination Naomi was learning to recognize. "Auntie Seo-yeon, can I talk to you privately?" Seo-yeon's smile didn't waver. "Of course, sweetie. What about?" "In the bathroom, please. Girl talk." Several of the women laughed at that, finding it adorable. Seo-yeon ruffled Hae-Song's hair and led her down the hallway. Richard waited exactly 30 seconds, then slipped away from the party unnoticed, his phone already recording in his hoodie pocket. In the hallway, Richard pressed himself against the wall next to the bathroom door, which Hae-Song had deliberately left slightly ajar. He could hear everything. "So, what did you want to talk about, Hae-Song?" Seo-yeon's voice was patient, kind. "I know what you're doing." Hae-Song's voice was much smaller, shakier. "I know you've been hurting, Daddy." A pause. Then Seo-yeon laughed. But it was different now, sharper. "Sweetie, I think you're confused. I saw you putting powder in his coffee from the little bottle in your bathroom cabinet. I'm not making it up." "Hae-Song, I know you've had a hard time since your mother died. Sometimes when we're grieving, I'm not grieving wrong. I'm telling the truth." Hae-Song's voice was stronger now. "Why are you doing this to him?" Another pause, longer this time. When Seo-yeon spoke again, her voice had changed completely, and all the warmth was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating. "Because nobody believes 8-year-old girls, Hae-Song. Everybody thinks you're just an imaginative child who misses her mother and doesn't like her father's new girlfriend. Even if you scream the truth from rooftops, nobody will listen." Richard listened, and his mom listened. That foreign doctor and her strange little boy? "Please, they have no proof of anything. We have proof that Daddy was poisoned. The blood tests could have come from anywhere. Environmental exposure, accidental contamination. There's no proof I did anything, but you did." "Why?" Seo-yeon's laugh was brittle now. "Because Hae-Song Pharmaceutical is paying me $2 million to make sure your father's research never goes public. Because your father is too noble and too stupid to understand that some people don't want affordable cancer treatment. They want profit. And dead men don't publish papers. Sweetheart." Richard's hands tightened on his phone. "Got her. That's evil," Hae-Song whispered, and Richard could hear tears in her voice. "That's business. And you know what's funny, Hae-Song? I almost liked you, but you're too much like your father. Too brave, too stubborn. It's going to get you hurt. My daddy's alive now. He's getting better. You failed." The sound of movement. Seo-yeon's voice got closer, more menacing. "For now. But accidents happen, don't they? Your mother learned that. Maybe you will too." That was enough. Richard burst into the bathroom, his blue eyes blazing. "Get away from her!" Seo-yeon spun around, her expression cycling from shock to rage to fear in rapid succession. "You little." "Yeah, I'm little. I'm also recording everything you just said. So maybe you should back away from my friend before we have bigger problems." For a moment, Richard thought Seo-yeon might actually try to grab him, try to take his phone. But then Min-jae appeared in the doorway, his face white with fury, with Naomi right behind him. "Min-jae," Seo-yeon started, her voice shifting back to sweetness. "These children have wild imaginations." "I heard everything," Min-jae said quietly. His hands weren't shaking anymore. His voice was steady and cold. "Every word. The whole apartment has excellent acoustics. You should have remembered that." Seo-yeon's face drained of color as she realized what had happened. The bathroom was right next to the living room vent. Everyone at the party had heard her confession. One of Min-jae's colleagues appeared behind Naomi. "I've called the police. They're on their way." Seo-yeon looked around wildly, trapped. Her eyes landed on Hae-Song, and something vicious flashed across her face. "You stupid little girl. But you ruined everything." "No," Hae-Song said, her voice small but firm. "You ruined everything because you tried to hurt my daddy, and my friend Richard stopped you." Richard held up his phone, the recording app still clearly visible. "And just so we're clear, I've already sent copies of this recording to my mom's email, Dr. Kang's email, and my cloud drive. So even if you try to take my phone, it won't matter. You're 8 years old." Seo-yeon spat. "Unless you have no idea what you've done." "Actually, I think I do." Richard's voice was matter-of-fact. "I saved someone's life. I helped my friend. I made sure a bad person faces consequences. That's pretty much everything I wanted to do today." Police sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Seo-yeon made one last desperate attempt to run, pushing past Min-jae into the hallway, but 2 of his research colleagues blocked her path. She stood there. When trapped in the hallway of the apartment she'd tried to turn into a crime scene, while an 8-year-old girl and an 8-year-old boy watched her with matching expressions of quiet satisfaction. The police arrived 7 minutes later. Detective Kim, a weathered woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, listened to the recording 3 times, while Seo-yeon sat on the sofa with her hands in her lap, refusing to speak without a lawyer. The detective also reviewed the medical evidence Naomi provided, the lab results showing thallium poisoning, and the timeline Richard had meticulously documented on his phone. "This is incredibly thorough work," Detective Kim said to Richard, genuine respect in her voice. Especially for someone your age. Thank you. I read a lot. I can see that. She turned to Min-jae. Dr. Kang, we'll need you to come down to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement. We're arresting Ms. Park on suspicion of attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder. If her connection to Hae-Song Pharmaceutical checks out, we may be looking at corporate conspiracy charges as well. Whatever you need, Min-jae said. He had his arm around Hae-Song, who was pressed against his side, watching Seo-yeon being handcuffed with wide eyes. And you? Detective Kim crouched down to Hae-Song's level. You were very brave. You saved your father's life. Richard helped, Hae-Song whispered. I heard. Richard also helped a great deal. The detective looked at Richard. You should be very proud of yourself, young man. You did what a lot of adults couldn't do. You listened, you believed, and you acted. Those are important skills. Richard felt his mother's hand on his shoulder, squeezing gently. He makes me proud every day, Naomi said softly. As the police led Seo-yeon out of the apartment, she looked back once, not at Min-jae or the detectives or any of the adults who stood watching. She looked at Richard and Hae-Song, and her expression was pure hatred. This isn't over, she hissed. Yeah, it is, Richard said calmly. Because you're going to jail and we're going to be fine. That's kind of how this works. The door closed behind her, and for a moment, nobody moved. Then Hae-Song started crying, deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole small body, and Min-jae picked her up and held her tight while she cried into his shoulder. It's okay, baby. It's over. You're safe. I'm safe. We're all safe now. Richard felt his own eyes burning with tears he refused to shed. He'd done it. They'd done it. Hae-Song's father was alive and getting better, and the bad person was gone and everything was going to be okay. His mother pulled him into a hug, and he let himself lean into her warmth. I'm proud of you, sweetheart, she whispered. So proud. I was scared, Richard admitted quietly. What if we hadn't figured it out in time? But you did. That's what matters. You saved a life, Richard. At 8 years old, you saved someone's life. That's extraordinary. The party guests slowly filtered out, offering their congratulations and support to Min-jae, several of them stopping to shake Richard's hand like he was an adult. By the time the apartment was empty, except for Min-jae, Hae-Song, Naomi, and Richard, it was nearly midnight. I don't know how to thank you, Min-jae said, looking at Naomi with an expression that made Richard think of the way princes looked at princesses in movies. You and Richard saved my life. You believed my daughter when nobody else would. You put yourselves at risk to help us. It's what doctors do, Naomi said softly. We help people. That's the job. It's more than that. Min-jae's voice was thick with emotion. You gave me my daughter back. She's been so scared and alone for months, and you gave her someone who believed her. You gave her hope. Richard did that. I just followed his lead. Min-jae looked at Richard with something like awe. You're an exceptional young man. Richard, thank you for believing in Hae-Song, for being her friend, for being brave enough to help when it was scary. Richard shrugged, suddenly uncomfortable with all the attention. She needed help, so I helped. That's just what you do. Not everyone does, Min-jae said quietly. Most people look the other way, decide it's not their problem, but you didn't. That says something important about who you are. 3 months later, on a Saturday afternoon that smelled like spring and new beginnings, Richard sat in Hae-Song's apartment with their homework spread across the coffee table. Min-jae was completely recovered now, his hair thick and dark again, his hands steady, his research progressing with 3 new papers published. Seo-yeon was in jail awaiting trial, and Hae-Song Pharmaceutical was under investigation by multiple regulatory agencies, and Naomi and Min-jae were dating. It had started slowly, with coffee after medical consultations, then dinners while the kids did homework, then an actual date where they got dressed up and went to a nice restaurant and everything. Richard had never seen his mother smile so much. She laughed at Min-jae's terrible jokes and listened to his stories about research and talked to him about medicine and life and grief in ways that made her seem lighter somehow, like she'd been carrying something heavy for a long time and was finally allowed to set it down. They're being gross, Richard muttered, watching through the kitchen doorway as his mother and Hae-Song's father stood very close together, supposedly cleaning up lunch, but mostly just talking and smiling at each other. I think it's nice, Hae-Song said, not looking up from her math worksheet. Daddy is happy. Your mom is happy. That's good. Yeah, but do they have to be so obvious about it? Hae-Song giggled. You're just embarrassed. I'm not. You are. Your ears are turning red. Richard threw a pencil at her, which she dodged easily, both of them laughing. In the kitchen, the adults looked over and smiled at the sound. They're good together, Min-jae said to Naomi, watching the children. They really are. Naomi leaned against the counter, comfortable in a way she hadn't been in years. Min-jae, can I ask you something? Anything. Where do you see this going? Us, I mean. He turned to face her fully, his dark eyes serious. I see it going wherever you want it to go. I know we're taking things slowly because of the kids. I know you're still healing from losing your husband. I know I'm still processing the fact that someone tried to murder me. But Naomi, he reached out and took her hand gently. I haven't felt like this since before my wife died. You make me happy. You make me want want to believe in second chances. Naomi felt tears prick her eyes. I want to believe in them too. Then we will, together, one day at a time. In the living room, Richard looked up from his homework to find Hae-Song watching him with those serious dark eyes. What? He asked. Thank you, Rich, for everything. You already thanked me like 100 times. I know, but I mean it every time. She reached over and squeezed his hand. You're my best friend, forever. Richard squeezed back, his blue eyes warm. Forever, Songbird. That's a promise. And as the afternoon sun streamed through the windows of the apartment that had almost become a crime scene, but was now filled with homework and laughter, and the beginning of something that looked a lot like family. Whilst Richard thought about promises, about how his mother had promised to always take care of him after his father died, and she had, about how he'd promised Hae-Song they would save her father, and they had, about how sometimes keeping promises was hard and scary and required you to be braver than you thought you could be, but it was worth it. Every single time, it was worth it. 6 months after that, Richard's phone rang just as he was getting ready for bed. It was Hae-Song, her voice urgent. Rich, there's a boy at my school. His mother is sick. The doctors can't figure out what's wrong. He asked me for help. Can we help him? Richard was already reaching for his notebook, his mind already working through possibilities. Tell me everything. What are the symptoms? As Hae-Song described the situation, Richard took notes in careful handwriting, his blue eyes bright with purpose. Because this was what he did now. This was who he was. The boy who listened. The boy who believed. The boy who helped. And beside him, in a frame on his bedside table, a photograph showed a man he barely remembered, but whose smile he recognized in the mirror every morning. His father, who his mother said had been a helper too, who had believed in making the world better, one person at a time. I'm proud of you, Dad, Richard whispered to the photograph. I hope I'm making you proud too. And somewhere, in whatever place existed beyond this one, maybe he was. So if you're sitting there thinking these kids are absolutely incredible, drop your thoughts in the comment section right now. And hey, before we wrap up, I need to know, have you ever noticed something important that adults missed? Have you ever tried to tell someone the truth and they didn't believe you? Drop your story in the comments, because I bet there are more Richards and Hae-Songs out there than we think. Hit that subscribe button if you believe in kids who refuse to stay quiet when something's wrong. And remember that sometimes the smallest voices ask the biggest questions. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing the right thing anyway. God bless you, and thank you for watching until the very end. You're amazing.
K Afro Tales. The weak will become strong one day.